Grant Robertson.
Mr Chair, once again great to have your enthusiastic support for giving me the call. I just want to pick up actually where my colleague Carol Beaumont left off on some potentially alternative titles for this bill, because obviously the Motor Vehicle Sales Amendment Bill is one option for a title for this bill, because it is amending the Motor Vehicle Sales Act, and that would be a traditional way, but it's not terribly creative, and I think it's important that we do in this House try and make sure that our laws are contemporary and they stay in touch with what's happening in the world and relevant. So one idea I had considered was around the motor vehicle sales, the ACT Party shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic bill, because that's one way of looking at it. Mr Boscawen's found himself in the chair, and
how many knives could they melt down out of a car to put into Heather Roy's bag?
Well, that's right. Mr Mallard has a suggestion there, which is interesting coming from him, as he's just re-entered the House after having been out of it for some time. So that was perhaps something that Mr Mallard might want to reflect further on. But the ACT Party obviously have reshuffled the deck, and Mr Boscawen has found himself in the chair. So he's a person who is obviously concerned about consumers. That's in the name of the party, and so he's concerned about those who buy and sell motor vehicles. Mr Mallard has another idea.
Consumers and taxpayers.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Well, surely you can do something.
Well, no, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that soon. But that is one alternative title that we had. We had thought of was the ACT Party shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic bill. But I actually think Ms Beaumont was on to a particularly good point around alternative titles, given that we are here in urgency yet again debating the Motor Vehicle Sales Amendment Bill, which has been taken through most of the stages of its life under urgency. So perhaps the Motor Vehicle Sales Go, Stop, Go bill might actually have been a more appropriate title for the bill, because it is hard to understand why a bill that was brought in by the Labour government and was wending its way through its processes, and then the National Party occasionally believe it's an urgent bill, occasionally believe it's a bill meriting a title of urgency and enthusiasm, and then stopping for a long time. Yes, perhaps going from being a Ferrari of a bill to being a Lada of a bill, and not really much in between from this government. So the Motor Vehicle Sales Amendment Bill is the title that the government's come up with. It's probably a fair enough title, although Mr Boscawen, who's been strangely silent, I might add, during the committee stages of this debate, he did make an early contribution, but then signs of life have been rare since then. But I'm hoping we'll hear from him in the further stages. Well, Heather Roy's had a lot of references made to her in this committee stage debate, and the consumer affairs role was one that she took seriously, and I'm sure she would have taken several calls, in fact, and answered Mr Hipkins' very useful questions about the consumer information notices that were raised earlier in the committee stages. So, Mr Chair, I think on balance the Labour Party can support this title. We perhaps would have preferred something more creative. We could have injected other words into the title, like Lamington, for instance, as one potential word that could have found its way into the title. But I think on balance we will be able to support the Motor Vehicle Sales Amendment Bill as the title, but we'll obviously welcome a contribution from the Minister to this particular part of the debate.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. Those who are of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. There is an amendment in the name of the Honourable John Boscawen set out on SOP 161 to Clause 2. The question is that the amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Clause 2 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Clause 3 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. I will report this bill with amendment.
Members, the House is resumed.
Mr Speaker, the committee has considered the Motor Vehicle Sales Amendment Bill and reports it with amendment. Mr Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
The question is that the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary will say no. The ayes have it. The bill is set down for third reading forthwith.